Welcome, everybody. As I say, I'm a senior product specialist here at Scientifica. My pleasure to join this webinar, our fourth installment in the Postdoc to PI series. This time, we've got to focus on securing that independent position in the United Kingdom specifically. We've got Professor Gavin Woodhall, Professor of Neuropharmacology at Aston University, and Professor Gareth Miles, Dean of Science, Assistant Vice Principal and Professor of Neuroscience at the University of St Andrews. With their experience of academic leadership, mentoring, and their participation in the UK hiring process, and grant and fellowship reviews, they bring a wide and valuable insight into the UK academic evaluation processes. I also hope Scientifica and I can play a role in that journey to independence for you. Where might Scientifica come in that journey? Scientifica specialises in providing global researchers with cutting-edge equipment designed for electrophysiology research. We're the world's most trusted supplier of patch clamp electrophysiology systems, whether this be upgrading your existing kit or inherited kit that's waiting for you, or where we provide everything you could possibly need to start from scratch. We combine our products and knowledgeable staff to empower you in neuroscience, cardiology, cancer research, and even more areas. In doing this, we're constantly working with you to improve and deliver the solutions that you need. If you have any questions during this webinar, drop them in the chat throughout. We'll have a chance to visit these at the end. With that, thank you so much for being here, everybody in the audience, and thank you to Gavin and Gareth. We'll get started with our first topic, which is understanding the UK academic job landscape. So the first question, kind of a big one, is there anything that makes the UK hiring system unique? As to Gareth.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so I'd start by just saying my kind of involvement in UK hiring has been both as a professor of neuroscience, hiring people to come work in my lab, but also from a faculty position perspective, being a former head of school. And now as a dean, I'm on many hiring panels, both neuroscientists and others. So yeah, have had some involvement and hopefully have some useful things to contribute. So I think in terms of uniqueness of the UK system, a lot of things are the same across the world. People may be able to tell that I'm possibly not from the UK originally with my accent. I'm from New Zealand and I've been arrived here via Canada. So the similarities. I think some key things about the UK system would include perhaps the REF, the Research Expertise Framework, which is the system by which we are sort of graded as institutions and departments on our research strengths and quality. And that can drive hiring in the UK. It can drive it in a cyclical fashion, depending on when the next REF exercise is. But that can lead to some focus on quality measures that are driven by external factors, i.e. the REF, which is really sort of coming from a government top down. So that's worth knowing about, particularly if you're coming into the UK like I did, to understand what is this REF process and what's being measured. The other thing about the UK system is I think we probably, compared to some parts of the world, we might have a broader range of activities that are expected of some of our academics. So research, teaching, and administration. And I know from some colleagues in parts of, say, North America, some of their faculty positions may be more, if not almost solely, focusing on the research elements. So depending on the role that you apply for, you've really got to be quite conscious of what is the role. We even had education-focused roles, which are, a much smaller percentage of research and very much focused on teaching and education. So I think those are some slight differences to watch out for in the UK system, I think.
Absolutely. And then moving on from that, those practical steps that a candidate could take to assess whether that department is the right fit. Some of the things that you touched on about their level of teaching and things potentially, but also that general department.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, what's their area of research? What are their sort of foci? And I'd say teaching as well, right? Because depending on the type of role, that could be really important. So you want to fit, and they want you to fit. So you want people around you who are doing similar enough research that you could see them as collaborators and you can benefit from them and they can benefit from you. And overall, you want a place with the right culture and environment. That's hard to work out, perhaps until you visit. But I say the same thing to people looking for a postdoc. Try and get the inside scoop. Try and talk to people in the department. Not necessarily those that are on the panel. If you can, reach out and just get a little bit of a feel for what do people think of the environment and that culture, and is it sort of right for you? what's the balance between research and teaching and admin? These kind of things are key, I think.
Really interesting. And sort of flipping that around to you, Gavin, what are the main factors the department itself is considering when deciding to recruit that new PI?
Yeah, and in most cases, you're looking as a department head or leading a school. You want to appoint somebody who has the right research fit, and as Gareth was just saying about, is there critical mass? Do you need to recruit in a particular area to support that area? But also most of the time, especially in the UK, you want somebody who can teach, and so that, to be able to teach across a range of areas, somebody who's flexible and who is also willing to teach. A lot of people don't rate teaching as highly as the research, but you want somebody that balances both aspects, and is able to perform in both ways. And obviously it's really important that people that you recruit are going to contribute to the ref as we were talking about just now. That's a really important aspect of our considerations. And in fact, we ask people who are trying to recruit here to fill in a kind of research project timeline to give us an idea of their future plan.
How long things are going to take until they sort of get the impact.
Yeah,
absolutely. So the next question jumps into go into detail about that strong future funding potential and impact. Before we jump on, as you sort of said, that demonstrating you're capable of teaching a wide sort of variety of subjects and areas, being open to that, is that sort of evidenced with a track record of previous teaching, or is that the sort of thing you can really, show off in the interview and how you?
I think it depends on what level you're recruiting at. If you're asking somebody who's very junior, then it's just a willingness and an openness to consider that. At senior lecturer or above, you might be looking for somebody to have guaranteed qualifications in teaching, for example, and to have led a module or done something else like that. So it depends on what level you're recruiting at.
All right. Very interesting.
I think, Jeff, you can be caught out there, and maybe I'm jumping ahead to the interview, but by sometimes you'll get asked these questions of what do you want to teach, and people will kind of very quickly go to a small area and not realize that actually oftentimes we're looking for people who are willing at least to broaden the areas they teach. So
yeah, I taught the kidney for years and I hated every single moment of it, but my boss he disliked it more than me, and so I had to do that bit.
It's easy to jump in and do that thing. You show off what you can do particularly well, rather than jumping in and saying, look, I am open-minded to the wider picture.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So broadly, what do these UK hiring panels look for in a prospective PI as our next topic? Gareth, what helps a candidate stand out as having that strong future funding potential?
Yeah, so, I mean, these are to some degree the same things that make you stand out when you're applying for a grant, right?
Yeah.
It's about having a clear, achievable research plan. And so when you're in application interview process, clarity is always the top thing for me. And then things like knowing the funders, and not just any old funder, but the appropriate funders for the type of work you're going for, and also the scale. And so you might sometimes consider going for smaller grants to begin with to get work going, and then the larger ones, but you really need to have done your homework. And particularly coming into the UK from afar, you really want to do your homework and understand the funders and who's realistic. I guess the other thing that's different between, just the grant application and what you're sort of talking, how you're selling it to a potential employer is, again, that kind of fit with the place you're going. So does it fit with what they've got? Is it feasible at the institution or the department that you're wanting to be hired by? Do they have the right facilities? Are there the collaborators around that would add value to the research that you're proposing? And I never underestimate, we'll probably come back to it lots of times, fitting in with the people around there. There's not, appease people's egos. They want to hear that you'll work with them. And that's always a great thing to build into it. But most of it is very similar to when you're writing a grant. But I think, absolute clarity and some achievability of your plans is key.
Yep. Would contingency plans and sort of plan Bs factor in at this point, or is it a case of having a clear path one?
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think particularly when it comes to funders and grant strategies, because we all know that, unfortunately the percentage success rate is
Yeah.
low and not particularly great just now. So yeah, I think if you can, it's not always easy. If you have a sort of, this is my research program, I want to go for this big grant with this organization, but I also could chop it up and go to some, get something done, or I could go to a second large organization. But having that knowledge of how you could package and repackage the kind of proposals that you're going to put forward is probably really helpful.
Yeah, sure. So a tough question now for Gavin, one of those harder ones. What are the weaknesses you most often see in these early career PI applications? What trips people up?
I think that very often some of the simple stuff, for example, as Gareth was saying, we're talking about whether somebody's collaborative, whether they're going to come into the department and integrate well. And sometimes people don't check out the websites and don't, have a look at the department, and then they don't suggest anybody who might be a good fit for collaboration. You'd be surprised how many people make a mess of just simple stuff like spelling and grammar on a job application.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting there and you've got 30 or 40 applicants to go through and score, you're actively looking for reasons to mark somebody down. And so if they haven't proofread, if they've still got their Chat GPT reference in the application,
Right.
lots and lots of those things can trip somebody up.
Yeah. I guess that's one of the things that does jump out a lot, the use of AI to streamline an application process, speed things through for people who are doing a lot of these applications.
Yeah, I think people are more and more tempted these days, and that it's actually really quite easy to tell still.
Yes.
At the moment, anyway.
I think that's what sometimes leads to the generic nature of applications, and I think that's what Gavin said at the beginning. You've got to fit the people and the place. I mean, the worst possible I've seen a number of times is when they've accidentally left the wrong institution on the, I would love to work at the University of X.
Yeah, I've seen exactly that
many times.
The week before last.
No.
Yeah.
That's it's the reality of it, isn't it? That of course people are applying to multiple institutions, I assume, and casting that net wide. But you've got to focus in when you're applying to a particular place. You've got to show.
Yeah, and evidence that you've looked around. And we have a children's hospital within a minute's walk of my office, and our good candidates will understand that, and they'll have had a look, and they'll be thinking about collaborations and work that they might do there, and that would be impressive in a candidate as well.
Yes.
Anything else? Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Nice. So before we jump on, how would someone potentially demonstrate, maybe I'm being specific here, but how would someone demonstrate the potential for external funding success? We've talked a bit about here's the plan, here's where I would aim to go to. How can you demonstrate, whether in the process of the application or in the interview, that you are, you're likely to be that person that finds that success?
If you're asking me, I would say it's someone who's thought about the arc of their plans. So you can't come and get a job and then be applying for an ERC advanced grant. That's at the other end of a long time, maybe 10 years. Right. But if you know that arc exists, if you know that you can apply for a Royal Society grant for 20,000 quid just to get something started in the lab, and that you've got to fill in the gaps and an idea of how the different funding agencies and bodies fit together in terms and the schemes within those agencies, that who they're aimed at. Do you know that a new investigator grant exists, and et cetera, et cetera. Showing that kind of knowledge, showing that you've thought things through, I think is very attractive in a candidate.
Yeah, shows that clear understanding of that process, and therefore actually appropriately applying to them.
Yeah,
as and when timing comes up.
Totally agree. I think, and then on the science side, it's no different to getting it from the funder. It's, do you have a really clear, sensible pitch? Because the people on the panel are the same type of peers who are going to assess your grant applications. So I think, it's the same the same stuff. But as Gavin said, it's a bit bigger in terms of a longer sort of program of work with that arc of how do you start and where do you want to be down the line. But yeah, good science is good science everywhere, I think, to everyone.
Fantastic. Okay, let's talk in practice, the application process in practice. We're applying now, pre-interviews, we're hoping to secure that interview to pique people's interest. What makes a strong CV and research statement for that UK PI role, Gareth?
Yeah, so I mean, the truth, first of all, is the things you think are important, yes, they are important.
Yep.
And that's your publication record, particularly if you're a postdoc coming into a PI role. Publication record trumps everything. I should say that I'm thinking about a role that is very much a research focused role, and there are education focused roles for where that could be different. So that's a major caveat. Grant funding, maybe, but that is, in my experience, totally gauged on the stage of career of the individual. We're not expecting someone coming out of a postdoc to have a project grant or, but we might expect to see that they've been trying to get smaller pots and they've engaged in the process of how to get funding. Then I think things like, we've talked about it before, teaching experience, again, depends on the role, but at St Andrews, for example, we want people who can all teach. So we do want some evidence that maybe you've had a go. That could be tutor work, it could be lab demonstrating, it might be some guest lectures, it might be whole courses. It just depends on people's career path and stage. But we normally want to see some evidence of engagement there. And then the other thing would be the sort of service to the wider community. What if is someone shown that they're willing to try to lead, again, at an appropriate scale to their career stage.
Yep.
And then you've got all of that, and the research, well, depending on the nature of the application, maybe a research proposal, maybe a EDI statement, maybe a teaching statement. But being clear and concise is the key, because as mentioned before, I mean, I've been on panels with 100+ applications. If you're not brief and to the point and I can't pull these key points out quickly, then not great. So there's lots of different formats that are fine, but if it's a big, busy, long document, then that's going to be difficult. So, the classic things of highlighting the key stuff, or the front part of your CV really highlighting what are your key publications and why. Probably we don't need so much of the why sometimes, if we can see. But yeah, brevity is, and that's everyone's challenge, I think. They want to get everything down.
Yeah.
But it's filtering that to what are the most important things to have at the top. And simple stuff like not some tiny text with tons of, why we're not going to have time to read every single word in detail. So yeah, but I come back to, for a research post, despite relevant, great to collect all sorts of things, but as a scientist, rightly or wrongly, we're measured against our publications and particularly in neuroscience, for example.
Sure. What about shortlisting? How does that shortlisting process usually work from your perspective, Gavin?
Well, most places use an online system, and you're going to go through and you're going to score a whole bunch of questions, anywhere between 6 and 12 questions that somebody would have set up. And almost always you're scoring as to whether they've actually met the expectation or the desirable thing, or whether they've exceeded it, or whether they've not met it. So it's one of those three. And then there's a whole group of people who are doing the scoring. And lots and lots of places will have a killer question in there, usually fairly early in the scoring process. So if it asks you for a degree in molecular pharmacology and you're chancing your arm and saying that you're going to apply, but you're undergraduate, or you're a medic or something else, that question, if somebody scores that as a nil, then the rest of the questions automatically follow, and that's the end of the application. So in some ways, don't waste your effort if you're applying for stuff, trying to apply for something that you don't necessarily fit, because the process will filter you out quite quickly.
And so with that in mind, would you recommend people checking in on that as part of sort of a casual reach out, casual connection?
I would always recommend, all my job adverts say, reach out to me and have a chat informally if you want to. I would say always reach out. And then you're not going to waste your own efforts.
Yep.
and you are, going to get to chat to somebody who's going to be looking at your application, later
Yep.
down the line potentially.
Because I suppose it could be hard to see as an external applicant what that killer question might be in that, in the job description.
Well, if
Is
you
that
talk to somebody, you're always going to get an idea of what they're actually looking for and what they want, and you'll get a good vibe, as I believe the youth say these days, a good feel for what what's wanted and whether you fit that. Yeah.
You can ask those hard questions, the stuff that's jumped out at you when you've read it and gone, oh, I'm not so sure if I meet that. You can simply ask and pull the plaster off quickly.
Yes.
And early in that process.
And then we score all of our independently, all of our candidates, and then somebody else adds up all the figures, and then you get told who's going to be on your shortlist. Is how it works at my place. Yeah.
Yep. Kind of a fair way of sort of normalising it across quite a lot of people, scoring and anonymising to an extent as well, isn't it? Sure.
Yeah. Sure.
You mentioned that group, the group of people who are scoring. What's the general makeup of positions of people who are scoring that? Who are applicants looking to impress?
Again, it depends on the level of seniority. We don't have anybody who's on a grade below what we're recruiting to on the panels. But then it's generally balanced for gender and all the usual factors. And then very often I'll it's good to have people on the panel who are from the same sort of neck of the woods, same area, so they'll understand the applications a little bit better.
Yep.
But we've just been recruiting for a vice chancellor, and in the panel for that, it's got everybody on from estates, from our technical team. It's got lay people, everybody on the panel. So it's not always predictable, and it's good to have a diverse panel.
Yeah, I think definitely different across institutions. I mean, we're a small institution and slightly different processes. So we'll have a long listing and a short listing. Long listing will be done within a school or department, and there might be a broader group. And as Gavin said, you try to get people who are specialists, but that's something to really look out for. So I'm in a school of psychology and neuroscience, and so the panel will include probably psychologists and neuroscientists. And if you're a molecular neuroscientist, you still need to appeal to the psychologists to a certain degree. So you've always to be careful about the breadth of your audience. So we would have processes in the school, which are that long listing, sometimes, some slightly qualitative, some quantitative, depending on exactly how it goes. And then we have a shortlisting process. And in our institution, the shortlisting panel then goes outside of the school. So as a dean, I'm on every panel in our Faculty of Science, which is many, and I try to pretend I understand pure maths and some other areas. But so, some panels will have these external folk, like myself in this case, who are definitely not in the field. But at that point, it's more closer to the interview stage. So it's a bit more about thinking about how you're going to present yourself in an interview. But to get into that long list, short list, you just have to really look at who you're applying to, what's the breadth of the department or school. I think that's really important. And who to second guess who might be reading it.
Yeah. Very interesting. So in terms, this is maybe a question that is on my mind as someone in my role. I reach out to professors an awful lot, and I see emails can be only so effective, and just picking up the phone can be very effective if you can catch someone. When you've gotten that job advert out, are you expecting to be picking up the phone to prospective applicants to sort of have a chat out of the blue, or is the done thing to email ahead, do a quick introduction, try and make your way through that way?
I would say no one uses the phone anymore. We don't have phones, actually.
Exactly. You have to fight your way through the Teams.
It's a Teams call, which sort of is via a phone. But I think we're really in a place now where, for me, people would email first. I mean, the problem is, as much as I agree with reaching out, like we have 100+ applicants for some of these posts. So at some point, if everyone reaches out, there's no way you can speak to them all. But I think for me, I'd probably, if I'm back in head of school days, I'd probably prefer an email first, and then I'd arrange something.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. So you would email first, and then make an appointment. I'm not quite as busy as Gareth, I suspect, but I am almost always in a meeting or in the lab, and so just phoning up's never really going to work. And I'm shortly to lose my phone as well. So yeah, that's spot on as well.
And
Much
controversially,
better than a
Jeff,
phone person like me.
the people who call us controversially, Jeff, are sales reps normally.
Exactly.
Putting it out.
It totally is. That's the game, isn't it? But no, it's totally true. Increasingly so. It's via Teams, and we're in those emails too. So how would a candidate capture you in that email? Because as you say, they're going to have a lot of emails from sales reps like me getting in touch as well. How is someone going to stand out?
First of all, short.
Yep.
For me, you can attach things, but the email has to be like, we're all too busy to read long emails. We need a short email saying you're interested in the job and why, and the briefest possible, and then maybe add a CV.
Put the attachments on. Don't do a second email later with more stuff. It just needs to be one. Yeah. I have 57,000 unread emails. At some point, you're just never going to get to zero inbox.
Nope.
And I really, same as Gareth, I want short, sharp communications that give me all the information in one hit, and then that's for the best. Yeah.
Absolutely. I like these answers. I'm looking at a couple of questions that have popped in out of the corner of my eye, talking about the length of time it takes people to do these applications. And how do you balance that time on applications you're unlikely to get? Here we go. You front load, you ask those hard questions, you reach out early and make that initial connection. And that's you sort of triage the applications you're going to go forwards with at that point. It's good for everybody involved that way. All right, perfect. Good. Moving along, navigating the interviews, the job talks, and those teaching elements as well. So a question to Gareth: what makes an effective job talk for a PI application?
Yeah, so I'm going to say what I said before. It's the same as the application. Like clarity is key. And having had the pleasure of doing interviews across different disciplines, I can tell you if I walk into an interview with a pure mathematician and they haven't at least started by telling me why, then they've lost me. And that happens a surprisingly high number of times. So you've got to be clear from the outset as to what's the point, what's it all about. And I'm not saying you have to have some amazing, saving the world impact, but at least, what's the piece, what are you really trying to discover or reveal? And I give the same advice I give to students and postdocs giving talks: is don't assume too much knowledge of your audience. Research what the likely audience is going to be, but I feel in my career I continually dumb down my talks and keep worrying that I've made them too simple, and I don't think I have made them too simple yet. And that's even when I'm talking to a room of neuroscientists giving them a neuroscience talk. So I think, be really careful about the setup, the why, who cares. Don't assume too much knowledge, and then be really clear about the takeaways you want. What do you want them to walk away understanding? You want to prove that you've done excellent research, and look at the excellent research I've already done, I've achieved already. And then depending on the exact questioning and what format they ask, many will ask for what's coming next. And so then you want, again, that really clear, concise, and based on what I've already done, here's what I'm going to do next, and here's why it's interesting. But I think a lot of times people get really bogged down in detail. This all depends on the amount of time you're given. But some of ours are 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe even less. And you've just got to kind of be concise and clear. And again, you play to people's egos. People want to walk away feeling like they learned stuff and they understood it all. But if people walk away feeling like they maybe didn't understand it all, then we all know we're not as happy. Some people walk away from this webinar thinking, what are they on about? And that means we haven't been clear enough.
Yeah, just to add, I'd say just remember that you're telling a story. Nobody wants to know the nitty-gritty detail of your study. We want a headline, and we want to know what you did and why it was great, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So one of the words that's come out a lot is this clarity. When you're looking for clarity, are we talking that journey, the story through the research, this, then this, then this, if this, then that, or is it communicating that your own understanding?
I mean, I think it's both, but communicating communicating, understanding. It's like when we teach, which we might come to, the best teachers can just really clearly give you the information in a way that you can take, and that only comes because they understand it really well and
Yep.
they can put it forward. So, in some ways, there's an element of feeling like a teacher when you're giving these talks, that am I actually teaching? Am I actually getting an understanding from my audience?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. And is sort of being able to pivot in the talk. Do you ever sort of see people ending up in a corner and then being able to dig themselves back out if they've lost people? You were looking for dynamics of that in these presentations rather than it being a completely polished, worded to the nth degree sort of thing?
I guess it depends on what format you're given. For us, it's often a fairly dry, you present, then we'll ask you. So,
Okay.
people can sometimes quite smartly weave in interaction. That's always tricky. It depends if you're online or in person. And sometimes I've seen people try to put in too much interaction, but you could do that. But a lot of times it's probably quite hard to gauge your audience on the fly, and you're sort of waiting for the questions and hoping that they're not questions that indicate a lack of understanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So Gavin, how influential are the teaching elements and formal interactions during that visit?
I'd say both of them are really important. If you turn up in, super scruffy and you don't talk to anybody, then that's not going to go well. I've had that happen as well. The teaching bit is really important. Very often I will set a teaching question that asks them to pitch a simple explanation. How does EEG work or something like that? Aim it at second year undergraduates. And that's testing how clear you can be, how simple you can be, and whether you can judge the right level to be at with your discussion. And if you're 20 minutes in and you're still talking about the physics of dipoles and et cetera, then you're doomed. And if you can get it all onto one or two slides and finish a couple of minutes ahead of time, you're going to do very well. Those aspects are really, really important. And those informal interactions, quite a lot of the time, are the people you speak to will be sussing you out and giving them a judgment later on, perhaps to the recruiting people. Was this person okay? Are they a good person? So every bit of it's important, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Timing's you raised, Gavin, is a critical one. I mean, it seems obvious, but the number of people I've seen go over the time they're given, they're just basically being crossed off the list. I've had people who have actually had to tell them, you'll have to sit down now. So you've obviously got to practice and be within the time frame you're given. But
and it is astonishing how many people shoot themselves in both feet. I've had 15, 24 minutes over time. I've had before I've stepped in and said, this is got to stop. It's really fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, you see at conferences and events and things and talks, people desperate to get everything across, and sort of, I guess, it's picking those headlines again. Back to
it's having respect for your audience, and
yes,
having enough respect to say, I'm going to take just the right amount of time to and within the limit to explain this to the people that are there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think the other part is, and you're fundamentally looking for a good colleague. And so do they respect you? Do they follow instruction? Are they likely to be nice to work with? This is a key bit once you get to this, probably the next questions actually, once you get into the hiring situation. The interview.
That's critical. I mean, academia is replete with odd people. There are more strange people in academia than almost anywhere else, I think, and you definitely need to focus on whether it is going to be somebody that you can work with, and have a good relationship with, and etc.
No, absolutely. No. Good. Okay, so we've got one more topic of questions, but just before that, as with these webinars, I've just got a couple of quick things to say about Scientifica and how we jump in and how we can be particularly helpful in this process. I'd like to tell you about our lab consultation service, everybody. Over the last 10 years, that's me at Scientifica. I've been personally working with researchers like you, everybody applying for these jobs here to get you the patch clamp and electrophysiology systems that you need at that start of your new lab or along that process. So you'll have your own Scientifica, as we call ourselves, dedicated to you wherever you might be in the world now and where you'll be planning to start up in the UK. So say for London, that'll be me. South of the UK, that's me as well in Switzerland. So I might follow you to or fro on a process like this. And we'll work with you directly in preparation to fully understand what you're trying to achieve with your new lab, whether that's patch clamp, optogenetics, calcium or voltage imaging, or a combination of all of these techniques and more. From there, we'll design that system for you around your exact application, whether you're working with brain slices, a specific region that calls for certain specifics, cell culture, iPSCs, cardiomyocytes, or if you're working in vivo. The process is that we focus on building something that works seamlessly for your experiments from day one. We also help with those practical realities, budgeting, timelines, making sure that everything fits and functions properly in your space. Because we've supported so many different labs, we can anticipate the sort of challenges that are coming and help you avoid any mistakes, help you get up and running faster and with confidence. So click yes on the poll that's just come up to let us know that we should reach out to you. It's never too early. And I will mention there's no cost for this. This is just us getting to know you, understanding the process, and how we can help you in your next stage. So give people a couple of seconds to answer further before we jump along. All right. I'll stop sharing that slide, and we'll leave the poll up for a little bit longer. Now let's come forward and talk about the hiring, the perspective from the UK committee members. So, Gareth, how much weight do reference letters actually carry in UK hiring? Is that out of your control to an extent now? We've done the application, you're waiting on other people talking about it now.
Yeah, in my experience, not a lot is the truth. And part of that is because everyone says everyone is amazing.
Right.
So they don't really differentiate. So in a lot of the hiring I've been involved in, it's almost a check that there isn't a red flag in the reference letter. And sometimes they'll even start now collecting letters later in the piece and definitely only from those who've been interviewed. Sometimes in some places only those who've been offered the job. So yeah, obviously you need them, they're part of it. But that's controversially my view of it, they're not really adding a lot these days. Yeah.
Gabby, what's your thoughts?
It'd be exactly the same. And a good reference is part of the course. The ones that stand out are the ones where it's, it says something very, very not a lot. Like, Dave came in every day of the week. That's a way of somebody telling you that somebody's, not the best. But I don't pay a huge amount of attention to them now.
Excellent. So everybody relax on that front. It is up to you on the applications. All right. Awesome. Okay. Another question about how things are viewed. Gavin, how do panels view things like career breaks and non-linear career paths? A fair amount to unpack here.
Yeah, I think it depends very much on the sort of individual circumstances. If you've had a breakdown of children and things like that, then that can be perfectly fine and very positive. In fact, there are lots of good schemes to get back into doing stuff in the lab if you've had a family and away on maternity or paternity leave and things like that. And again, if somebody's been ill, and has an understandable explanation, all of that works. I quite like it when people have had non-linear career paths. I failed my A-levels completely because I spent all my time playing snooker and drinking beer.
Love it.
And I ended up at night school to get qualified enough to get to university, and then from then it was all good. And so I have a soft spot for people who've done, quite non-linear things. Sometimes it's great to employ somebody who's been in industry for a bit and, got some kind of different experience, because very often they tend to be much more motivated. And that's a great thing. Self-motivation is really important in our game, and if you can take somebody on that's going to drive themselves hard, then that's really good. It might shock you to know that only 16% of our professors ever write grant applications. That's very true of a lot of universities. The percentage will change, but there are a lot of people who aren't motivated. Yeah, there's lots of non-linearity happens at all stages of the career, and I personally do like that they intrigue me. People who've got different career paths.
Yeah, absolutely. Gareth, a similar take from you, or?
Yeah, totally. I mean, where there are career breaks, you just make them clear. And, in my experience, it's always taken into account. You're looking at publication record, whatever it is, absolutely point out that you had a break at some point. And I agree with the non-linearity of paths. I mean, whatever that might be, it could be really cool to have someone who's gone into industry for a while and got a different set of skills and then, moved into academia, whatever paths. I think it's all interesting. As Gavin said, you want people who are driven and willing to put in the effort and bring some different ideas, different skills to your kind of department or school.
Cool indeed. So that's all of our topics so far, and the prepared questions that we had. Before I go into sort of a Q&A session, we would second to drop some questions in the Q&A section. If there's anything further, we've got a couple, but we've also got some that have come through ahead of time. Gareth, Gavin, were there any sort of areas that we didn't touch on so far that you think would be worth jumping back to right now, or shall I continue with some of these questions?
I think we've covered most things I can think.
Yeah, I've got nothing stands out.
Yeah. All right, brilliant. Okay, so I've got a question in the chat here about universities hiring horizontally, hiring people who've held an assistant professor position before. How might a postdoc compete with a more seasoned and senior academic?
So in our system, it all depends what the ad says we're looking for. So we might be looking for a lecturer or a reader or a prof, and if we're looking for a lecturer, then in my experience, it's not so much about a horizontal hire. In fact, we're very keen to get someone on what we perceive to be a steep trajectory who's been a really successful postdoc. So so I obviously if you're applying for a position at reader or prof level, then you need to have already had your own independent group. But from my experience, at least, in some ways, it could be harder if you're looking for a new lecturer and someone's already been a lecturer, then they really have to have proven themselves in their lecturer slot. They better have got some grants and really prove they can be independent already. Whereas if you're coming out of postdoc, we're not expecting that you've been able to prove all of that. So no, I'd be more positive in my experience of hiring that a really good postdoc at lecturer level sometimes looks better.
Yeah,
I would fully agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. There's a tough question in here I'm going to throw in. With the current financial climate in academia in the UK and globally, how do you think that's going to shape the job market and availability of funds from UPRs?
What was the last part of the question? Sorry, your voice.
Sorry. So current financial climate in academia, UK and globally, how do you think that's going to shape the job market and the availability of positions and funds for new PIs?
It's definitely very tough, at least from our perspective, financially at the moment, but it's not stopping us recruiting. The only difference I would say is that there's more of a tendency to recruit at a slightly lesser level. So I've just lost a professor from my department, and I'm going to replace him with a lecturer stroke senior lecturer, because that helps me save some money for the university. And so that's good for the budget, and probably good for all those early career researchers out there, because there's more opportunity for them because we're one less professor and one or two more junior people. So it's not stopping us recruiting. The well-managed universities, I think, are okay and are still recruiting and filling posts. And there's a lot of course development going on across the sector, especially in the UK. I started my neuroscience degree 10 years ago, and I've now recruited 11 members of staff for that. And I'm starting a pharmacology degree again in September this year, and so we're recruiting for that. So, because a new course brings in enough money to employ new members of staff. Simple as that. So,
yeah.
From my perspective, I think it's still relatively positive.
Yeah, I'd say similar. I mean, it's you can't save your way out of these issues. You have to still actually invest if you want to succeed going forward. So whether that's definitely in people, but also facilities, I think, yeah, well-managed universities will keep investing and trying to move forward. And I think also there are peaks and troughs in academia or any industry, and you see this over the longer time scale, and I think that'll always be the case. And so sometimes it might look a little more difficult at one moment in time, and it'll pick up later on. So yeah, but I think again, the hiring's there. You've just got to be conscious of coming back to things we talked about earlier. Where is the funding for you in the present environment? And that might shift slightly.
Positive answers. It's nice. I appreciate that. Jumping around a little bit. Well, actually, on the topic of funding, let's stick with it. Which funding agencies are giving funding to be an independent PI in the UK to postdocs from other countries?
I think this is one where I would be hesitant to get it wrong.
Yeah, sure.
But really, you just have to do some searching. I know in my experience, there's been things like Newton Fellowships, which can bring people. I've had postdocs come from afar. Marie Curie initiatives. I think it really depends on where you come from and your roots to the UK. And I think they can be quite specific based on your country of origin and your citizenship. So yeah, you have to just really carefully look at the different schemes online and check who they're trying to bring
out there to see if they're appropriate for you.
In that regard, it's good to have a look at the things like the British Council and see, that they often have very country-specific funding schemes. And yeah, I'd agree with Gareth. The Marie Curie's, very good for that.
Yeah. Excellent. Going into sort of a more science-based question, how much preliminary data are necessary for PI applications and proposals?
I mean, my view again is really your publications are your preliminary data in a sense. So same as a new investigator grants. Typically there's a acceptance rather that new folk aren't going to have the chance to build a whole lot of prelim data. So yeah, prelim data is not something that I'm looking for in a job talk necessarily. It's more about what's the research you've done that you've seen to output as a postdoc, and then how will you utilize that in a new plan. But I wouldn't expect someone coming from postdoc to have too much in the way of preliminary data personally.
No, I agree. I wouldn't leave it. It's never come up.
Yep, love it. Brilliant. Okay, talking about those publications then, which works better? Fewer papers in mid to high level journals versus many smaller publications?
I'd go for better publications in better journals.
Yep. Quality trumps everything. Of course, there's extremes there. That if you've been around for a long time and published once in the highest impact journal, that probably still isn't going to work.
Right.
But there's a certain level of productivity which is going to be very field specific, and in neuroscience, it's going to be even within different parts of neuroscience. It's going to depend, but yeah, quality I think trumps quantity always.
Yeah.
Me.
Okay, the same person asked about the best way to get in touch, potential opportunities. Touched on that. It's those emails, make them short and punchy to cut through. And any online resources that help in preparing applications or the interviews in specific? Is there anything specific you guys can jump to?
Right, not. It's been a long time since I applied for a job. So
I mean, apparently there are some helpful webinars sometimes, but other than that, I don't know.
Right. Right. Well said. There's also out there, and sort of, collaborating, talking to people going through the same thing or who have just done it will be particularly useful, making those connections. One other question here, just reading it through. Okay, so this person feels methods postdocs would be harder to get a position in, especially those on empirical projects. They're working on a research methods project, and that means, at least for them, it takes longer for publications and research outputs. Would that mean a weaker, less competitive CV? I mean, Gareth, you were just saying that it's so area specific that it is what it is.
Really. Yeah, I think, if you're applying for the right job, which fits the kind of science you do in your background, then the people deciding will know what is the usual expectation. And, I see this in, maybe as an electrophysiologist, sometimes we take longer to build a data set than, now I'm going to get in trouble for saying the wrong things here, but someone maybe on a molecular end, certain folk I know who can really, it seems to me, churn out data quicker. But people in my field understand how long it takes to get that data set. So if you're going for the job that fits you, then I would assume that wouldn't be a big issue. You'll be measured based on the norms for your field, subdiscipline, etc.
And I can see, I can feel maybe a pressure coming in to get that next job at the right time coming in. So someone feeling like they're not applying to necessarily the ones that fit. But some of the things we said earlier about those non-linear careers being interesting, and it sounds optimistic to me. But if things aren't right there now, what other exciting things are there to do while you keep working on it?
Yeah, and it's tricky because we said make sure you fit, but at the same time, and yes, you've got to tailor your application, but you're tailoring an application. You already have the application, so you are tweaking what you already have, and you do have to cast your net wide. And one of the things I think is really important is how wide are you willing to go? And I've had this conversation with people from my lab, and there's a New Zealander who's got as far away from New Zealand as possible by accident, but was willing to look around the world. And so you need to think for yourself what's right for you, maybe your family, maybe you've got a family already, but how wide are you going? And the wider you can cast that net, the more chance you have. But it's got to fit what you want for your life as well.
Yeah, I would add. So I was on a panel last year, and we had a candidate who had 700 papers, and everybody was really impressed. And I said, well, they're all meta-analyses, so I am significantly less impressed. Not to discriminate against people who do meta-analysis, it's a perfectly fine way to go. But people do factor in. The differences in people's publication records for sure. And the different fields. I'm just coming to the end of a project that's been going for 7 years, and I'm still only going to get one paper out of it. Different stuff that you do takes different amounts of time.
Yes. No, quite right. Absolutely. Well, that answers all of the questions that we've had come in so far. I'll give people a couple of seconds to drop in anything else that they might want to ask. But Gavin, Gareth, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about this. I've learned a lot of things about some of the pressures that the people I work with are fighting that I don't particularly see. The challenges with picking these right applications and then working through alongside the kit that's needed that I get involved in. So it's perspective where we're that small part of a big picture that people are working through. So we haven't had any other questions come in now. So if anyone wants to drop them in still, I'll answer them offline and give you guys feedback on that. But with that said, thank you everybody for coming and listening. And I'm sure this has been extremely useful. Gareth, Gavin, thank you so much.